In the grand and shadowed annals of the Great Crusade, there are records of glory, of worlds brought into the light of imperial truth. But there are other records, sealed and classified, that speak not of triumph, but of terror. Chronicles of worlds that should have remained lost, and of horrors that slept in the dark between the stars, awaiting the footfall of man to awaken them. From the vaults of the Iterator Historical Archive, we unseal one such file, a classified record from Expedition 63. The destination? A planetary system designated 140-20, a world that would soon earn a more visceral, more accurate name: Murder. This archival pict tells the tale the official histories omit. Above, the lightning-choked heavens of a world hostile to life itself. Below, its red deserts, where a lone Astartes helm lies broken, a testament to the staggering casualties suffered. This single, silent artifact encapsulates the entirety of the Megarachnid Campaign and the tragedy of 140-20. A conflict so brutal, so utterly savage, it became a benchmark for horror even among the veterans of the Crusade. The designation Death on Murder is not hyperbole. It is a scar upon the memory of the Imperium, a grim reminder that even for the demigods of the Legiones Astartes, the galaxy holds terrors that can shatter ceramite and break the unbreakable. To understand the heresy that was to come, we must first understand the darkness that the Crusade uncovered. We must go back to the red sands of murder. But the lessons of the Interrex, of their tragic sophistication, were soon to be eclipsed. For as the Great Crusade pushed into the unknown, compliance was sought on a world catalogued only by a number, planet 140-20. The veteran armsmen of the expeditionary fleets, in their gallows humor, gave it another name, a name that would be etched into the annals of the Legiones Astartes forever: Murder. Classified a death world of threat level Extremis Alpha, its very atmosphere was an act of war. Volatile shield storms reacted to planetary entry with focused malevolence, generating localized pressure vices capable of shredding even Astartes drop pods and silencing all Vox communication. Multiple entry failures were recorded before a single boot touched the ground. On the surface, two hells awaited. The red dust plains stretched for thousands of kilometers, a sea of highly irradiated ferrous soil where visibility was choked to zero. And then there were the Stalk Forests, impenetrable mazes of dry, 20-meter-high, thigh-thick stalks that required mechanized clearance or flamer support to breach. But the true horror was not the terrain. At the base of these stalks, swarms of tumorous, hissing black larvae served as a planetary alarm system. A neural-linked hive mind, it was suspected, that would emit a high-frequency screech upon any disturbance, alerting far larger, predatory forms that hunted within the gray maze. It was a world that did not simply kill, it hunted. A self-contained ecosystem of slaughter. And it was into this meat grinder that the finest warriors of humanity were to be committed, unaware that the true test was not one of conquest, but of survival against a foe that would define the very meaning of terror. The planet designated 140-20 would earn its name with brutal efficiency. The first Imperial forces to make landfall, elements of the Blood Angels, were met with catastrophe. The first waves of landers were devoured not by a foe, but by the world itself. Unprecedented atmospheric tempests that swallowed them whole, scouring all Vox signals into silence. A subsequent wave in armored drop pods punched through the fury, establishing a fleeting foothold. Then came the first contact reports, garbled encounters with upright, metal-clad insectoid hostiles. Then, only silence. The Blood Angels expedition was declared lost. The planet's infamous name was not yet known, but it was being earned in blood and static. The full truth would only be pieced together later, from a corrupted data slate containing the last testament of a dying Imperial Army Sergeant-at-Arms, whose final words were a simple, chilling verdict: "This world is murder." The distress call from the Blood Angels did not go unanswered. The Emperor's children, the 3rd Legion, were the closest Imperial unit and responded aboard the battle barge Proudheart. On the command deck, however, tactical reality was a canvas of pure black. As this strategic overlay demonstrates, the planet's surface was a void, complete sensory and auspex blindness. The status of the lost Blood Angels was unknown. Heavy reinforcements from the War Master's own Luna Wolves were 4 days out. This fact fueled the decision of Lord Commander Eidolon. Pride sanctioned the action, an immediate, company-wide drop directly into the anomalous shield storms, seeking the glory of a swift victory. The consequence was preordained by arrogance. The scatter pattern shows the truth. Drop pods were thrown wildly off vector. Unit cohesion was annihilated upon impact. The grand gesture of response had become a prelude to 100 separate struggles for survival. The would-be rescuers had themselves become the lost, trapped and bleeding on a world that was actively hunting them. The primary adversary was the environment itself. Before a single hostile was sighted, the landing zone declared war on the senses. As this recovered data slate shows, Imperial forces were inserted into a battle space offering 0 lines of sight, a suffocating maze of thick, groaning stalks that swished and swayed in a perpetually radioactive wind, masking all movement. Technological superiority, the bedrock of Imperial warfare, was rendered moot. The auspex, as the tactical overlay confirms, registered only failure and the vague, terrifying proximity of an overwhelming threat. The ambush sequence, logged in the final moments, is a clinical record of utter horror. First, the ubiquitous hissing of the planet's native black larvae suddenly ceased, a plunge into dead silence more alarming than any war cry. Then, the towering grass stalks began to vibrate violently, as if the very ground was being electrified. Finally, a sound returned, a deafening, rapid chittering from all sides, the drumbeat of hundreds of rapid legs. The first strike was not a battle, but a culling. Hostile combatants, appearing only as a silver blur to the naked eye, moved with impossible speed. Surviving Vox logs describe these engagements as hyper-violent, chaotic intervals decided in a mere 12 seconds. 12 seconds. Not a measure of a firefight, but the duration of a man's life from the moment of contact to the moment of evisceration. How does one quantify a war fought in such fleeting, brutal increments? What doctrine can account for an enemy that turns a hardened soldier into a victim in less time than it takes to draw a breath? And so, the verdant world, discovered by the 63rd Expeditionary Fleet, was redesignated murder. For from the crimson fogs and flesh-pulp forests they came, not as beasts, but as an army, a force of impossible biology and deliberate, tactical slaughter. Post-conflict analysis, filed under archive reference Xenos M04, laid bare the horror. We speak of the Megarachnid warrior clade. Each creature stood 3 meters tall, a walking fortress of fibrous, zinc-gray armor, whose segmented body mass was 1.3 times that of a fully armored space marine. They possessed 8 limbs, ambulating on the 4 hindmost with a hyperactive, blinding speed that defied their bulk. They had no eyes, yet they saw us. Their wedge-shaped heads, crowned with chitinous ivory crests denoting rank and age, tracked every movement with unnerving precision. Their primary armament was a part of their very being. 4 upper limbs terminating in naturally occurring metal-cased blades, each over 1 meter long. We watched in disbelief as these bioweapons sliced cleanly through legionary ceramite, turning the Emperor's finest into grotesque statuary of ruin. The sheer biomechanical perfection was the most terrifying revelation. The seamless bonding of organic plating with technological artifice was not the result of random evolution. It was design. It was intent. A question began to burn in the minds of the Mournival, a question far more chilling than the immediate threat of extinction. Who were the architects of this living engine of death? On the crimson plains of murder, the Third Legion fractured, not by the claws of the Megarachnid, but by philosophy. In the face of extinction, two definitions of the Astartes warrior were forged in blood and chitin, each a grim portent of what was to come. Examine the tactical assessments of Captain Saul Tarvitz, known even then as the Soldier. His focus was absolute: discipline, survival, and maintaining unit cohesion against a tide of living death. His strategy was the bedrock of the Legiones Astartes: disciplined bolter fire to break the Xenos charge. The heavy broadsword was not a weapon of glory, but a tool of last resort for desperate, two-handed defensive survival cuts when the line was about to break. Tarvitz recognized the truth of this campaign: a desperate fight for life against an indefatigable biome. But across the battlefield, another philosophy took root. Captain Lucius, the duelist, saw not a war, but an arena. His focus was personal glory, a narcissistic drive for martial perfection. To him, this world-ending threat was merely a practice cage. Lucius abandoned firearms entirely, casting aside the holy bolter for an antique terawatt longsword and a grotesque trophy: a severed Megarachnid blade limb wrapped in shield liner. He did not seek to survive the hyperlethal aliens. He welcomed them as the ultimate sparring partners to test his wrist work. Two captains, two approaches to slaughter. One, the shield of his men. The other, an artist painting with their blood. This divergence was more than a tactical disagreement. It was a schism of the soul, a deep crack forming in the very marble of the Emperor's children. In the wars to come, the Legion would be forced to choose which of these paths it would ultimately walk. What Captain Tarvitz's surviving squad found was not a battlefield. It was a gallery of slaughter, a silent answer to the fate of the 140th expedition. Before them rose the trees of woe, obscene mushroom-shaped structures of calcified white alien cement. Upon their jagged stone thorns were the bodies of the lost blood angels, their crimson ceramite a stark contrast to the bone-white branches. This was no act of war. This was predation. The data slate reveals the ecological purpose. These are macabre aerial feeding grounds. Winged clades would impale live prey upon the stone. Then, with a strength that defies belief, they would utilize their hooked head crests to crack open and peel back the ceramite armor plates, allowing the swarm to feast upon the organic material within. An Astartes is a demigod of war, encased in the finest armor humanity can forge. Yet here, the warriors of the 9th Legion were reduced to meat in a larder. The true horror was not the death, but the cold, indifferent system of it all. Disgust was the catalyst. Faced with the grotesque desecration of fellow Astartes, their gene seed and honor defiled, Captain Tarvitz made a choice. He would not permit the bodies of the Blood Angels to be left as trophies for alien scavengers. This was an act of pure defiance, a statement of principle for all legions. While the swordsman Lucius argued to hoard their remaining melta-charges for the fight ahead, Tarvitz saw a greater principle at stake. He gathered every last charge. The ensuing action was a massive synchronized detonation, a funeral pyre of apocalyptic scale that vaporized the stone trees and incinerated the feeding Xenos. Yet, such a titanic blast could not go unnoticed. This singular act of honor created a brilliant acoustic and visual beacon in the gloom, a call that the scattered, treacherous remnants of the Emperor's children, including the arrogant Lord Eidolon, could not ignore. In attempting to honor the dead, Tarvitz had just summoned all parties to a new battlefield. And so, with every thunderous detonation of the Xenos' crystalline flora, the Astartes of the 3rd Legion believed they were gaining ground. Each explosive trap triggered, each 50-meter stone tree felled, was tallied as a victory. A foolish, fleeting notion. What the Emperor's children witnessed next, as recorded in this recovered tactical data slate, defied all known paradigms of warfare. They saw the emergence of the rebuilding swarm. The very rubble of their victories became the genesis of their foes' recovery. The cycle began with consumption. Giant clades of the Xeno species, the super-heavy and ponderous builder variants, descended upon the shattered remnants. Their bladed limbs, which had been instruments of war, now became tools to gnaw and process the explosive shards. Then came the abhorrent refinement. From abdominal spinnerets, a fibrous, milk-white biological cement was extruded, a grotesque parody of creation. Finally, construction. In a display of impossible industry, swarms of smaller, scurrying clades used their spatulate limbs as living trowels, catching the foul cement and, in a matter of mere minutes, rebuilding the stone trees to their full, horrifying height. It was here, amidst the dust of endless, pointless destruction, that the tactical reality dawned upon the proud Emperor's children. They were not fighting an army, they were fighting a self-repairing planetary biome. They could not out-attrition an enemy that fed on its own demise. Every bolt round fired was merely tillage for the next harvest of war. If attrition was impossible, what other kind of war was there to be waged against such a thing? With the Kinnebrock builder gangs attempting to reconstruct their weaponized architecture, Captain Saul Tarvitz committed to one final, desperate act. He led his loyalists in a charge not to win, but to provoke, intentionally drawing the wrath of the entire hive to stop the reconstruction at any cost. The swarm descended upon them. Thousands of terrestrial warriors, the true might of the Megarachnid Empire, flooded the clearing in a chittering wave of blades and chitin. The Astartes were overwhelmed. The peerless swordsman Lucius found himself buried beneath a dumped payload of alien cement, gluing his limbs to the ground. Bolter ammunition was a fading memory, and the legionaries were ripped apart by the sheer, crushing weight of alien numbers. Their blades became broken, blunt implements. As Tarvitz himself was knocked to the dirt by a severed alien limb, all hope seemed extinguished beneath the red dust. Then, thunder boomed in the clear night sky. Meteors, drop pods, impacted the clearing. The Luna wolves had arrived. Salvation, it seemed, had come from the heavens. But this deliverance wore the face of the very war master they had defied. The turning point was not one of survival, but of a far more terrible confrontation to come. For Horus Lupercal had returned to the world he himself had named murder. And from the poisoned skies, salvation arrived, not as a gentle light, but as thunder and iron. The heavens were torn asunder by the meteoric descent of drop pods, each a ceramite fist striking the heart of the Megarachnid horde. For the warriors facing annihilation, it was the sound of impossible rescue. From the shattered earth, where the pods slammed down, the elite spear tip of the Luna Wolves deployed, led by Captain Tarik Torgadon. As this picked capture illustrates, their impact was immediate and absolute. Superior numbers and the disciplined fury of fully loaded bolters met the Xenos onslaught. Coordinated heavy weapons fire tore through the Megarachnid swarm, shattering its cohesion and driving the screeching horrors back into the gloom of the Stalk Forests. In the midst of this controlled carnage, a moment of profound legionary brotherhood was recorded. Torgadon himself, his white gauntlets stained with alien ichor, reached down through the smoke to haul Captain Tarvitz from the gore-soaked dirt. His words, preserved on this tactical data slate, echo across the ages. "Off up you come, brother. My name is Tarek. Pleased to meet you." A life saved, a line held, a brotherhood affirmed in blood and battle. On the surface, a perfect victory for the Great Crusade. Yet, we must ask, what unseen poison resides in a place the Astartes themselves would name murder? And what becomes of a hand offered in brotherhood when it is later asked to hold a blade aimed at that very same brother? The butcher's bill for the action on murder had been tallied. Eidolon's pursuit of glory, a reckless charge born of compromised pride, had reduced a full company of the Emperor's children to a mere handful of survivors, a cost paid not by the commander, but by the men he led into the trap. Before us stands the confrontation. On one side, Lord Commander Eidolon, combat ineffective, yet snarling with indignation. He demands respect for his station. On the other, Captain Torgadon of the Lunawolds, status, operational. His mental state, calm, dismissive. He is grounded in the brutal, tactical reality of the moment and the authority of the War Master. He offers Eidolon nothing but contempt and the cold, hard truth, delivering a verdict that cuts deeper than any blade. "If I was Primarch Fulgrim, I'd have your head on a pole." Words of such magnitude exchanged between legionaries are not easily forgotten. They are seeds of bitter resentment planted in fertile ground. Before the great betrayal, there was a moment of perfect, terrible unity. On the world designated Planet 140-20, two Primarchs, a god of war and an angel of vengeance, made a vow. This recovered tactical data slate, archive reference 784.006.m31, records the grim calculus. The peerless Sanguinius, Primarch of the Blood Angels, surveyed the carnage wrought upon his lost sons and the battered Emperor's children. Standing beside him, a dark mirror to the angel's light, was the War Master Horus himself. The verdict was absolute. The alien species had refused all communication, offering only, in the words of the record, endless, indefatigable slaughter. Faced with such a foe, a vow was made. Sanguinius, for his lost brothers, swore, "I would cleanse this rock." And Horus, ever the tip of the spear, responded with the words that would echo into eternity, "We will murder, murder together." The aftermath was a foregone conclusion, a brutal 6-month campaign of total planetary annihilation. The target designation was updated. Planet 140-20 was now simply murder. Its status, terminated.